Hello and welcome back to Dr. Hollowed. Today we are looking at the creepiest glitches people have experienced in real life. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. While this may not seem creepy, I can tell you the experience most definitely was creepy. This happened when I was 8 and working in the yard with my mom. My mother and I were doing the spring planting in the flower beds around the house. I went inside for a pee break, and on my way to the bathroom, I had to walk through the living room. I entered the LR through the kitchen. Looked up, and on the other side of the LR, I saw sitting on the couch none other than my sister. She was wearing her school uniform and was looking towards me, but not at me. Never said a word. Nothing really unusual, right? What makes this a glitch? My sister was hundreds of miles away at boarding school. Not helping us plant flowers and certainly not sitting at the edge of the couch, giving me a blank stare. My little 8-year-old self reversed course and locked himself in the half bath until he regained the courage to go back through the house and finish planting hostas. I was taking the train home one afternoon, and an old man was sitting a row ahead of me. He turned around and asked for directions to the hospital, and I told him which stop to get off at. Eventually, his stop arrives, and he gets up to leave, but before he exits, he turns and says, "Thank you. I'll see you later." I said, "Yeah, no problem," and again he said, "I'll see you later," and he looked me right in the eye. I said, "Sure, see you," and he got off the train and hobbled away with his cane. Thought it was a little weird he was adamant about seeing me around, but whatever. The weird thing is, when I got off the train and to the bus station, about 5 minutes after boarding my bus, I heard a voice that sounded like the old man. I looked out the bus window, and sure enough, he was there at the bus station, same clothes, hat, and cane. I know it was the same guy, but with his walking speed and the available bus/train routes at the time, I have zero clue how he got to the bus station right when I did. There are no buses near the hospital that go to that bus station, and my train was the only train that had just arrived at the bus station. It was summer. I lived with my grandma. My brother was visiting for the summer. I was in college at the time. We had spent the day at the local pool with my cousins. We decided to all go out that night with some mutual friends. So, we stopped by my cousin's house to drop them off. My grandparents are there. We stop in for a minute, and then we're leaving to go get cleaned up to go out that night. My grandparents say they'll be home shortly. Okay, whatever. So, my brother and I head home. Our rooms were in the basement, with a bathroom in between. My brother gets showered and is cleaned up. I haven't showered yet. Suddenly, the dogs are barking upstairs, and we can hear the garage opening, and then the door from the garage into the house opens, and we hear people talking and walking around. My brother says he's going to head up and hang with the grandparents while he waits for me. Before I even get into the bathroom, he comes back looking freaked out. No one was there. The dogs were lying down, the garage was empty, and no one was in the house. As he's telling me this, we hear it all over again, exactly like before. This time we both go up, and there are my grandparents. We both heard it happen before it really happened. In 6th grade, I called my mom to let her know my dad was about to head her way to drop my little sister and me off, divorced parents. When she answered, I said, "Mama," and my mom frantically asked, "My name? Is that you?" I said yes. She asked where I was, and I said, "Daddy's house. We're about to come home now, just wanted to let you know. Love you, Mama." She asked me, "Who's Daddy? Where are you? Are you okay?" Obviously I was confused and just answered, "Mama, I'm fine. I'm okay, I love you, I'll see you soon." She said she loved me too, tried to get me to stay on the phone, and I just hung up. My dad later got a call and visit from the police. As it turns out, I'd accidentally dialed the number of a woman whose daughter had the same name as me and had gone missing. Everything was cleared up very quickly, but I always thought it wasn't a mistake that I dialed the wrong number. Maybe it was that woman's daughter saying goodbye. Sometimes when I dream and I wake up. I know it's a dream. I just know it's a dream. But I can't wake up. And the harder I try to wake up, or the more I realize I have to wake up, the scarier it gets, even though nothing really changes. It feels like darkness enveloping you as you try and wake up from your fake room. How do I know it's a fake room? Just some weird details. Like how my wall looks a little too white. Or the Christmas tree's lights are on when they're supposed to be off. Don't ask why I have one in my room and not the living room, lol. So then I go through like maybe 1 to 2 minutes of intense waking up, falling back asleep. Trying to open my eyes, but then falling back asleep right after. As I said, the rooms are similar but not too similar, so I can just about tell when I'm in the real world and when I'm dreaming. Or perhaps both rooms are fake, and when I finally wake up, it's the real me in the real world. I dunno. Those are the scariest of dreams, even though they last for a few minutes, because that's right before I'm about to wake up. When I was little, my family was at my grandparents' place. They had a pool in the back, and us kids were swimming while our parents ate on the porch. I, being a devious 8-year-old, decided to swim into the deep end where I was not yet allowed. Being cocky and overconfident about my ability to swim, I dove down and touched the bottom of the pool. I stayed down there for a moment before I felt I needed air. I started to swim up, but I realized that I needed air a lot more urgently than I had previously thought. I felt my lungs burning and thought to myself that I needed air now. Still another 1.5 feet underwater, I took a breath. Strangely enough, it felt as though I had breathed in air. I broke the surface and tried to cough out whatever water would be in my lungs, but there was nothing. I didn't find it very odd at the time, but now I think about it often. I was walking outside at 2 a.m., looking at my phone and listening to music with my headphones. I was completely zoned out. I was about to cross a street and briefly glanced if there was a car coming. I looked the wrong way, and if the light was green or not. Right as I am in the middle of the road, a car is basically a meter away from me, and the last thing I see are the blinding headlights right below my knees and the horn blaring through my music. A fraction of a second passes, and I almost fall off my feet because I was expecting the impact and bracing for it. I open my eyes and see myself good 10 feet away from the edge of the road. The song has changed, the light for the cars is green, and I see the red tail lights of a lone car driving down along the road. My heart is pounding out of my chest, and I had to sit down for a while. I get home and start reading about near-death experiences, and I stumble on an idea called quantum immortality. Not sure if it messed me up even more, but the idea is that if you die in one parallel universe, your consciousness still continues in the ones where you live. I was more heartbroken about the thought of my mother having to bury me in my original universe than I was about my own death. I was having these really vivid dreams. Each dream picked up where the last night's dream ended. These dreams were so real, I told my parents about them. I wish I had written them down in a dream journal and dated them. Weeks later, I was at a concert and started getting deja vu. It was my dreams happening in front of my eyes. I turned to my friend and said, "I've been here before, man. Seriously, in like 5 to 10 minutes a girl with blonde hair will come by us crying because she lost her friends in the crowd. I will calm her down, let her hang with us until she feels better, then she will go on her way." 5 minutes later, that exact thing happened. She looked exactly like my dreams. The words I spoke were exactly from my dreams. She stayed for a few minutes, calmed down and stopped crying, then moved on into the crowd and disappeared. Afterwards, my friend, who witnessed the entire event, was too freaked out by this premonition and asked if we could leave the show early. I still get deja vu every few days, but I've never predicted something successfully again. I'm not sure I believe in special powers, but that event has changed my entire outlook on life. I think there is a glitch in my dream program that lets me see the future. I was at my grandmother's house, and she has this rug by the fireplace. My dad was standing there and started to kick it about to try and straighten it out. Seemingly by instinct, I said, "Why are you always kicking rugs about?" I got puzzled looks from everyone. You see, at that moment I had a distinct memory of him doing it only very recently before. It felt like hours ago, not days or weeks or whatever. I can even see the rug that he was kicking before, blue with white squares and circles on, but for the life of me I can't remember where or when it happened. I even asked my mother, and she hasn't got a clue. It's like I've generated a false, random memory, but it feels, so real. I'm not even the confiding type, so it was unusual just saying something about it, but it was so compelling. Not sure if this is a glitch or what, but it kind of freaked me out. It sounds so innocent, but the idea that I might not be able to trust my memory is terrifying. I can't describe how real it felt, but I also know that it never happened, at least not in the way I remember. When my dog was younger, he was a destroyer, so he always had only one toy, and I bought another one once this was broken beyond repair. I also make a point of buying distinctly memorable toys so every time he loses it, a neighbor can recognize it, and it is brought back to us. This time it was in the form of a lighthouse. My dad took the dog hiking. I put the dog in the car, threw his toy in with him, and off they went. After they came back, my sister, mom, and I played with the dog. We made him fetch his toy, throwing it between us, the whole thing. A day later, my dad came by and gave me his toy. He said he just found it under the car seat, where it must have dropped. I checked, and no toy was at our home. I also asked my mom and sister if they bought another one. They had not. There is also no way it could have gone back into the car since my dad is the only one using it. I still don't know what we played with that day. I was in middle school, and my locker combination stopped working. I had to leave my backpack and books in the administration office while they were getting it fixed. I went to class, and when I came back, everything had vanished. I asked the woman who had been sitting at her desk the whole time if she'd moved them, and she looked at the spot, astonished that they were gone, and said no, and no one had walked by that area either. I wondered if I'd gone blind or something, so I literally felt the ground where I'd left my things, and they were truly gone. The woman did the same, just because we felt like they had to be there. I looked away for a second, then looked back, and suddenly everything was exactly where I left it, not a thing had moved. Since then I've had similar issues where an item will just vanish only to reappear later, usually within a few minutes. Now I joke and say the me in another dimension must be using it, and I'll get it back when she's done. Sometimes if I need something fast and I know exactly where it is, I'll ask someone else to grab it, and they're often able to find it no problem. If I don't know where it is, though, no one can find it until it magically reappears. So I knew my roommate's routine/mannerisms very well. One day I'm sitting on the couch and, as usual, hear my roommate walking up to the house to come in and jingling her keys while greeting the dog. I expected her to walk in the door any second, but she never did. I shrugged it off like I imagined it. A few minutes later her boyfriend arrives. I tell him I could have swore I heard my roommate walk up to the house, but she never came in. He said, "You've been smoking too much of that wacky tobacco, kiddo." And he had a point, so I shrugged again. Within 5 minutes we hear a car in front of our house, busy street, speed super fast, come into a screeching halt, and crash into something. Me and him both ran outside, and nothing like that whatsoever was happening. Now I was high, but he was not. When my roommate finally came home, she thought we were both high. But I know I didn't imagine hearing her phantom come home, and me and a witness both heard a phantom car crash. If I was imagining or making this up, it'd be much more interesting and or cohesive. But I never experienced an evening like that before or after. About 5 years ago, when I was 30, I had a vivid dream about a young girl who I had never seen before, but in the dream I knew her. We walked together for a while, and she took me to a graveyard. We stopped at a headstone with a girl's name on it. The next day I went to my parents' house, and my mom was telling me that the previous day was the anniversary of my cousin's death. She died in her crib when a fire broke out in her room. She was maybe 1 year old. I was also a baby at that time. And as we don't talk about her often, I don't know her name. But when I told my mom the name from the headstone, she confirmed it was hers. Even right now, I can't remember her name. But it was weird. When my grandmother died, I dreamt I was visiting her in a nice, clean home with lots of sunlight, and she was making sweets. She told me she was fine and happy and not to worry about her. P.S. I am an atheist. This was in my freshman year of college. It was me, friend A, and friend B. On one night in our fall semester, all of us, off in our own dorms and alone, had panic attacks, went to sleep at the same time, had the same dream, and woke up at the same time the next day. I'm not shitting you. The reasons for the panic attacks were different. One friend's PTSD had been triggered, I was dealing with some chronic illness stuff, and another friend was stressed about homework. The dream involved two people walking at night in a city and being saved from a sniper. It then cut forward to a plane jacking over the Amazon, with the passengers of the plane being forced to jump out. It then cut forward to a house in the Amazon with a very detailed layout and an interior I can still remember very well. The house belonged to the descendants of the couple who had been saved. Each of us played a different role in the dream. Friend B had been the sniper on the rooftop who had failed in their mission and then had died during the plane jacking. Friend A had not been present for the assassination attempt but had heard about it and died after jumping out of the plane. I had saved the couple, and instead of dying, I safely made it to the ground after jumping out of the plane and then went into the house below. Certain details differed between our dreams, such as exactly how many seats were on the plane or the color of the curtains in the house, but it's really fucking eerie. When I began to describe the dream at lunch the next day to friend A, they stopped me to explain they'd had the same dream, and I had them write down everything they remembered. When friend B said at dinner that they'd had the same dream, we had them write down details too. Neither person heard more than half the dream before I stopped and told them to write down what happened next. I honestly can't think of how three people, with very different schedules who watch different shows and usually go to bed and wake up at different times from each other, managed to sync up like this and experience exactly the same things. I'm a police officer. One night there was a gas explosion in one of the flats of the block, so we had to evacuate people and stay around that block at night to watch over the stuff since some houses were left open in a hurry. At night I was sitting in one of the houses where the old guy allowed us to rest so we wouldn't freeze outside or spend the whole night in the car. I was really tired and fell asleep. Later, after like 40 minutes, I receive a call from my partner telling me to leave the building because gas is leaking again. I stand up, get my stuff, and go outside to see everyone looking for me and my mate running to me and asking where I was. I'm kind of surprised and get my phone to show him that he was the one to call me, and I answered his call and even talked to him. But when I get my phone, there are no answered calls, only missed ones from about 10 different people. I still have no idea how I answered the phone and talked to him. Was that dream? I probably would have died there if I kept sleeping in a room full of gas instead of air. This was about 6 months ago. I was reading about simulation theory a lot, and it was creeping me out. I was constantly questioning every aspect of reality, nothing felt real. One day I was at a friend's house and smoked a bit of weed, which I do often so it wouldn't have produced a crazy effect in me or anything. But if you've ever smoked and had unpleasant thoughts, you know that weed can amplify feelings of anxiety. So I'm driving home on the highway a few hours later when I feel safe to do so at about 5 p.m., and I begin to have a panic attack thinking about the simulation. I think, oh God, is anything real? Is anyone real? Am I real? How do you define real? If we live in a simulation, why is there so much suffering? Is our reaction and adaptation to suffering being measured and analyzed? I immediately want to get my mind off this train of thought, so I open Spotify and put on the Beatles on shuffle. The song Let It Be comes on. Immediately, I notice the sunset is fucking beautiful and shining directly into my eyes. In the lane to the left of me, a car pulls up slightly ahead. On the back right bumper, the car has a smiley face drawn on it that looks like this, and it's staring me directly in the eyes. I don't know if I believe in simulation theory, God, or anything like that controlling our reality, but in that moment it absolutely felt as if something was trying to calm me down. I was looking at the smiley face shining in the sunset as the chorus to Let It Be played. It felt like I was being told, don't panic. Be happy. The world is beautiful. Let it be. It was exactly what I needed to see and hear in exactly the right moment. It felt like the simulation exists and was telling me, it's okay. This could be a random set of coincidences, but it did not feel like it in the moment at all. It was reassuring ultimately because I think that, even if we're in a simulation, that doesn't diminish the beauty that exists in the world or take away from the importance of being happy while we are alive. Hopefully, after we're gone, we'll find more answers. My bathroom door is right outside my bedroom door. So if I open the bathroom door, I can see my bedroom. I normally have both of my cats in my room. I keep a child gate in my doorway to stop my dog from sifting through the litter box. One night I had to use the bathroom. I shut my bedroom door behind me to keep my cats in my room for the night. If I were to keep my door open, they would both run out and steal my sister's cat food. I finished in the bathroom, washed my hands, and opened the door. As I opened the door, both of my cats jumped down from the child's gate and ran to my sister's room. They jumped in perfect unison and landed next to each other. In the moment, I thought my door must have been left open, and they must have pushed it further open. I looked at my bedroom door, and it was closed. I looked around to see if anyone would have let my cats out, but it was 1 a.m. and everyone was asleep. I was so confused and swear that both of my cats teleported through my closed door. To this day I have no idea how that fucking happened, and it still freaks me out. I've always been suspicious that I might be psychic or something. Sometimes it's just deja vu. Sometimes I feel like I know something is going to happen and then it does. Obviously there are a billion other times where I think something is going to happen and it doesn't, but it's always been in the back of my mind. One mundane time in particular, I was standing in the kitchen as a boy, and I looked at the spice rack, which was over top of a bunch of random kitchen shit on the counter and the table below. I imagined something falling from the top and hitting everything on its way down like a kitchen avalanche. Then I pointed at it. At that exact moment, something actually fucking falls from the spice rack onto something below, knocking something else over. It wasn't a full kitchen avalanche, just a few things, but after the mess was done, I just stood there absolutely mind-fucked. How often does stuff just fall over on its own? How often after you predicted it? My creepiest was when I was in my late teens. It was morning, and I hadn't gotten out of bed yet, was just laying there relaxing with the covers over my face to block out the daylight. I could hear my dad in the living room doing whatever. All of a sudden I could feel something start crawling on the bed. I could feel the weight of it sink my mattress down as it came up over me, like it was a large person on their hands and knees straddling me. But in my mind it was a werewolf. I could hear it breathing, and I could hear the mattress squeaking under it. And I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't move or scream for my dad. Then it was just gone. Really freaked me out, and I've had a fear of werewolves ever since. I love scary movies and books, but will not watch a werewolf movie to this day. I worked at an ocean resort in Texas as a houseman who is responsible for resupplying the housekeepers and pulling all trash and linen from vacant rooms. As I entered one of the rooms, I felt an inexplicable fear that I have never experienced in my life. It didn't cause hesitation or panic, it was more like a trance. As I walked deeper into the room, I saw a large object in front of the closet. I couldn't make it out though, my vision was perfectly clear, but I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. I felt like I had no choice but to accept what was going to happen. I walked into a nearby bedroom and sat on the bed for a few minutes, then got up and left the room. As soon as I did, the fear left me, and I checked the time, and 2 hours had gone by. Since I hadn't pulled the trash or linen of that room, I re-entered it when the housekeeping were going in to clean it, and the room was perfectly normal and nothing was in front of the closet. This may get lost now, but I'm a type 1 diabetic who was prone to seizures when I was younger, all the way until about 20 years old. The seizures always happened in the dawning hours, so most of the time when they happened, my mom/dad could hear me fall to the ground and could support me until I came through. My body also could move, but I was never conscious before I started seizing, so it was very similar to sleepwalking while awake. One time, I woke up, went downstairs, and had to lie down in an armchair with my back on one arm and my legs propped up on the other so my body was in a V shape. Then I started to seize. When I seized this time, I had vomited, but because of my body's position, I started choking on it and was unable to breathe while seizing. Somehow I woke up alone in my living room on the floor, but my body was on its side, like how they teach you to prop a drunk person up to prevent them from choking on their own puke. When I got up, I was surrounded by my own vomit, urine, and shit because I had lost so much oxygen that all my muscles relaxed and let everything go. Yet somehow the seizing motion or force of seizing rolled me off the armchair and onto my side perfectly to clear my esophagus of the vomit. No one had heard anything upstairs because everyone was still sleeping, so my parent/sister could have found me dead on the floor if not for this freak accident. It still kind of makes me believe in a greater force sometimes, and I'm always grateful I'm still here. Maybe not super creepy. When I was 18, I wanted to go to some concerts with my friends for a weekend, but I had a job at Taco Bell and I worked full time, so getting weekends off was hard. I called them and told them my aunt in Boston was sick and that I needed to go see her. She was like 98 at the time, so it was believable. I needed a couple extra days off, so I called the morning of and lied and said she had died. Boom, got the time off for the funeral. I called my mom one day later to talk to her, and my dad answered, asked if I could speak to my mom, and he replied, telling me that mom isn't in the mood, Aunt Gladys from Boston had passed away that morning. Swear to God, I thought it was a fucking prank that my parent/job was playing on me for lying my way out of a weekend of work. She, honest to God, died a matter of hours after I lied to my work about her funeral. My friends still joke with me that I killed my aunt to see all-time low. My grandma joked once that we could use her fake death as an excuse if we really needed it. I absolutely have not done that. Learned my lesson. I woke up from a crazy dream about a fox growling at me. Then I went to look for something in my cupboard and found my fox-themed souvenirs. I was teaching English in Japan. I thought, coincidence, not a big deal. I went to work that day, and the topic was animals. Put all the animal flashcards up on the blackboard, and before I could start, I kid you not, the fucking fox card fell and slid towards a child. In that moment I froze and immediately felt like I was being warned or the universe was trying to tell me something. There were no open windows, and all the cards have magnets behind them. I pondered about this and Googled and saw something about animal spirit guides. I didn't really believe in these things, but it was interesting to me. It said that I was probably being warned about someone. I forgot about it for a while until I met up with an old flame. I was in the process of getting over him, and he mentioned something about a fox. Then I realized it was him the universe was trying to protect me from. Anyhow, during my last few days in Japan, I was walking in one of my favorite scenic locations at the edge of a forest. Guess what I saw? A real wild fox. I may not believe in these things fully, but it's something that creeps me out even to this day and made me actually pay attention to the coincidences in my life. Oh, and here's another. I lived in a small town in Japan. The likelihood of meeting someone from there in other parts of the world is extremely small. Now I work in a big city in another country, and they just hired a girl from that exact town to work with me. Still trying to figure out the meaning of this one. Just remember this one, my first dog that I had for like 12 years died, and I felt horrible and blamed myself for not looking after her well enough. Beat myself up about it for a long time until I had a dream about her. In the dream, I woke up and went outside to find her sitting in the exact spot I wanted to bury her. If my yard was deep enough, that's where I would have put her. She was just sitting there smiling at me the way a dog smiles. The dream felt so peaceful, everything was well lit, and she was sitting on freshly dug dirt. There was usually grass in that spot. I just felt like it was her way of forgiving me. I was sitting in geography class, the Netherlands, and just paying attention to the fun class of my awesome teacher. There was one person sitting next to me and 2 other classmates in front of us, all just listening to the teacher, and about 28 other kids in the room scattered around. The teacher asked me a geography question, and I started answering it. The whole fucking class is looking at me. As I am talking about this question, Earth, blah blah blah, climates blah blah blah. You know how it goes. Now here comes the weird shit. The girl in front of me who was looking at me as I'm talking, something happened in the empty space between us. At about eye height. Now it is very hard to describe, and I will try to do my best. Out of nothing, this bright white flash, about 10 centimeters in diameter, appears. It makes this weird grinding noise, kind of like when you rub 2 pieces of styrofoam together. It looked nothing like electricity or anything, but it was so strange. The only way I can explain it is that it kind of looked like that scene in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone where Hermione fixes Harry's glasses. Out of her wand comes this thing that kind of looked like it, but smaller. At this point I was like, WTF, am I having a stroke? Now this thing happened for everyone to see, right in front of my face. It left behind some smoke too. It moved like it was morphing, if you can understand that. So I fucking froze and asked, WTF, did you guys see that? And the people around me, including my teacher, were like, WTF was that? Everyone in the close vicinity saw it. A very sweet smell emerging from the flash stayed there for weeks after. I always felt strange after that. We were kind of baffled and shrugged it off afterwards. I couldn't sleep that night thinking about what it was. Especially because so many other people disliked it. Does anyone know what this could have been? Thank you very much in advance. I'd be happy to answer any questions to clarify stuff. Never did anything else like that happen again. When I was a sophomore in high school, my grandma started acting a little weird. Like one day she came home late, we had a room for her in our house and she lived there 50% of the time, and it turns out she got lost, which was weird because she'd been living with us for like 18 years. Her doctor thought she could be getting dementia/Alzheimer's, so he told her to get a brain scan. The Friday before finals week, I heard my mom crying downstairs. I went into her office to see what was wrong, and the second I walked in, I knew with 100% certainty my grandma had brain cancer and was going to die. You know when you get startled and you feel that kind of shock? That's what it felt like. And then I blinked and thought, that doesn't make any sense. She's acting 99% normal. There's literally no evidence for that, but I just knew. My mom got off the phone. She didn't say anything major, just kind of yes, okay, yes, got it, and turned to me. Stage 4 glioblastoma. Tumor the size of my fist. 3 months to live without treatment, a year if we do surgery/chemo/radiation. She died 9 months later. I miss her so much. About 2 months ago I woke up from a nap in the night, where I remembered dreaming about a big spider in my room. I have arachnophobia, so I was a little creeped out at first, but I got over it quickly after realizing it was just a dream. My mouth felt dry from waking up from the nap, so I went downstairs to get a drink of water, when I noticed a huge spider on the cupboard. I was completely frozen in fear for a solid 5 minutes, wondering if I was still dreaming or not. I pinched myself, poked my palms, and even damn near touched the spider because I was so convinced I was still in a dream, due to the experience being so similar to the dream I just had. A few moments later, I vibe checked the spider with a vacuum, not caring about waking my sleeping family, because the only thing I knew was that I would stop at nothing to rid the kitchen of one of the devil's pets that decided to go for a stroll in my house. When I was around 10, we lived way out in the country on a busy state route. People lost or with car trouble would stop often. My dad worked a swing shift, so if it was dark out, Mom wouldn't answer the door. One night, a guy that was walking with a big pack on his back knocked. For some reason, Mom didn't feel threatened and answered the door. He asked for some water and held up an old milk jug. She agreed and invited him in. She made him a cup of coffee, filled his jug, gave him a lunch meat sandwich, and packed him something for the road. The whole time he was sitting at our table, he was hugging that pack. Wouldn't sit it down for a second. Odd. He was super nice though and was asking me stuff like what my favorite subject in school was, all friendly and innocent. When he was done eating, my mom asked him where he was heading, and he was vague. She offered to drive him to the next town over, which was about 7 miles up the road. He accepted with gratitude. The truck ride into town was pretty quiet, and he was still clutching that damn bag. Wouldn't put it in the back. We dropped him off, he thanked us and told me to try my hardest in school because it's important, and off he went. We were watching the news about 4 months later, and there's the guy's mugshot. He had killed a guy in another state and made his way through Ohio, where we were, and was arrested 2 states over, if I remember correctly. He had been camping in the woods when the cops found him. I can't remember the whole story because this was almost 40 years ago, but he claimed it was self-defense. He was a perfect gentleman to my mom and me, but my mother was one hell of a bad judge of character. Anything could have happened to us that night. And who lets a strange man into their home at night when they have a 10-year-old daughter? My mother-in-law was in the hospital on her deathbed. I drove 4 hours after a 12-hour day at work, housekeeper. She passed around 10 hours after we arrived. By this time I was without sleep for 36 hours, as the night before I couldn't fall asleep. After another 2 or so hours of comforting family, we finally were ready to head home. Husband doesn't drive, we get in the car and decide to find a decent hotel once we crossed back to our home state. Driving on the freeway, I started to feel really drowsy but thought I could make it at least another hour. Sure enough, there was a traffic jam, and the car started stalling horribly. We took the nearest off-ramp and called my father-in-law and he ended up towing us home. On the ride home, I remember fading in and out of consciousness and even hallucinating. We made it home safely, and I passed out for a good 12 hours. Once I was up and moving again, we started the diagnostics on the car and couldn't find anything wrong. It started up and ran perfectly, and we haven't had any issues since. One day at a rainy afternoon, I was like 6 or 7 years old. I was walking into my room, and I automatically looked to the window as it was directly to the other side of the door, and when I looked there I don't know what I saw because the window had distortions in it, so who is on the other side can't see inside and vice versa, so it's a little more private, but it was a gigantic bright pink mass. It was something like 3 meters tall, and I was very surprised to see that, so I ran to the side door of the house so that I could see what it was, but as I said, it was a rainy day, so I just needed something like 30 centimeters to make the turn and see what the heck it was, but I slipped backwards and hit the back of my head full force. I get up from the floor, and I really can't feel anything wrong with me, nothing was hurting, it was a ceramic floor, so, yeah, very hard, and when I walked to where I could see the outside of my window, nothing was there. I believe I saw something the universe didn't want me to see and held me back without hurting me. Maybe it was good that the window had built-in distortions? I live at my grandparents' house with my mom and them, and not much happens around here, suburban and not near any points of interest. Usually I'll go outside on the deck multiple times a day for a smoke, so it's become a pretty mundane and regular process for me. About 4 months ago, I went outside for a smoke as per usual, and everything was going swell. Then I heard an approaching plane from above and saw it begin to appear overhead. At that exact moment my eyes are drawn to a passing red car, and after a second or two of me watching this car pass, I watch it begin to immediately reverse with no effects of inertia, did not stop at all, just started going backwards. At first this didn't really register in my mind until a second or two later, as I looked up into the sky to see the same plane flying backwards in the opposite direction it was pointing before flying forward normally after a second or two. This sight gave me the strongest feeling of fear and dread I've ever felt to date. It's that unmistakable feeling of knowing something is just wrong. I immediately went back indoors, my heart still racing, and never mentioned a word of it to anyone since. Still feeling the lasting effects of how this fucked with me and haven't gotten over it yet. Some might not think this is the creepiest glitch, but I was 100% shaken by it at the time. Well, at the beginning of 2010, I went to the movies with my good friend Jay to see the new movie The Book of Eli. It had just come out in theaters a few days prior. Our little farm town was so far off the map that going to the movies was pretty uncommon, but we both were uncharacteristically pumped to see this random film. To put this in perspective, we had to drive about an hour and a half to get to the nearest AMC. We get to the theater, sit down in our seats, and I'm staring at the advertisements when I get a strong feeling of deja vu. Not just a sense of being in the theater before, but being there with Jay to watch Book of Eli, sitting in this exact way, which we had never done before. Instead of fading away on the back burner like the other instances of deja vu I have had, it got proceedingly more potent as the film started. From the opening scene of the movie to the twist at the very end, it was like I was watching the movie for the second time. I kept nudging Jay, saying things that I knew were about to happen, like he's going to miss the first shot, the second one will hit, but nothing happens. They're going to hold up in an old house, and there's a bunch of guns in the sofa, and other things that couldn't have been guessed. The first few times, my buddy was brushing it off, saying to just watch the movie, but as I proceeded to correctly predict the events of the film, he also started getting freaked out. At the very end, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt what the twist was and couldn't help but tell my buddy. When the film concluded, he quickly got out of his seat and marched out of the theater, almost angrily. When I got to him outside, he was upset with me, saying I must have gone and seen the film without him. I swore up and down that there was no way I could have gone to the theater without him and that I wouldn't lie to him if I did. He was my oldest friend at the time, and like I said, going to the movies in our town was a big deal. We drove home silently, as I tried to wrap my head around what just happened while my friend brooded over the thought that I lied to him for the fun of it and refused to admit it. When we got to my house, I asked my girlfriend to explain to Jay that I had been at the house all weekend and asked her if we went to the movies, which she said, not since Zombieland, and Jay frantically yelled, but he knew the whole movie. I still to this day don't know what had occurred, but I will remember it forever as the strangest, most divine event that has ever happened in my life. I used to live a little ways out of my city, with a long private driveway. My sophomore year in high school, a classmate ended up driving down my road late at night and somehow went off the road and crashed into a tree, killing him instantly. Maybe an hour or two prior, I had just driven down this driveway to go home for the night and saw nothing. Well, fast forward to the following winter. It's about 9 p.m., so it's almost pitch black outside. It had just snowed, so there was a fair amount of snow, and my house was pretty big at the time. These points are important. I was in my basement, my mother was in the laundry room downstairs, my aunt was in her room opposite the door, and my grandma was in the living room upstairs, about halfway across the house. All four of us heard a distinct knocking on the door, 3 solid knocks. We all get to the door and see nobody. I walked outside and didn't see any footprints in the snow, so we tried not to think about it. Then I thought about the classmate and decided to jump in my car and drive down the driveway. I shit you not, a car had slid on some ice at the start of our driveway, flipping the car upside down, with the driver still in the front seat. Called an ambulance, and he ended up being okay, but definitely the weirdest glitch I've experienced. Weird shit used to happen in my childhood home all the time, but this one has always stood out. So I'm probably 11 and I needed to get something out of my parents' bathroom, so I knocked on the door. No one answered, so I went in and announced my presence again and peered through the curtains hiding the ensuite bathroom, and it was clear. Went in, kind of looked through the glass in the shower, grabbed what I needed, and left. Cue my dad coming downstairs 10 minutes later, saying, "Cunt 6669, why did you come into my bathroom while I was showering?" I say, "You weren't in there, I checked." He's annoyed and replies, "I yelled multiple times for you to get out, and you ignored me. There was no possible way I wouldn't have been able to see or hear him." So he saw me, but I didn't see him. So my dad is perplexed and drops the whole thing, and I kind of just go with it since at least I'm not in trouble. It was as if we were on different planes or something. I wish I could figure it out. I have never liked being tickled under my chin and eventually realized I had a scar with the stitches still in at the age of 13. When I inquired my parents about this, I was told that when I was a year old, I had fallen in the portable baby bathtub and split my chin open, necessitating surgery. The thing is, I have had occasional dreams before of watching a baby from a third-person POV through an open door at a higher angle, as if I had witnessed myself at a parent's height, splashing about a red tub and falling. When I heard about the story, I immediately linked this vision with my own mishap. Keep in mind I never knew I had this accident until it was told to me. Afterwards, I was unable to control myself from scratching my chin to feel the scar, as it felt like a vulnerable part of me, until one day, in the family car. I scratched my chin and felt the scar with stitches there. 10 seconds later, I did it again, and the stitches were gone. It was as if it had vanished in the matter of seconds. I never could understand it. My chin remains the belly of a cat, a no-contact zone by anything else but me. One time me and a few friends drove from Jersey to DC to Nashville for a convention. It was wild, but by the end of it we were all extremely sleep-deprived from the convention and driving. Somewhere around DC in the middle of the night, there was a construction zone. We stop at a stop sign being held up by a construction worker in the middle of the night. We think nothing of it, they're just controlling the traffic. 5 miles down the road, I'm still confused by what the fuck just happened. That construction site had no lights, they weren't doing anything. And in fact, the more we talked about it, none of us could remember the workers even moving. We eventually decided, as the convo went on, that they were actually just mannequins, or some art exhibit, holding up a stop sign. Otherwise that person was just standing there in the road, still as a rock, in the pitch black, holding up a sign long before we came along. Some fake construction site? I'm still so confused. I wanted to go back, but we were all so exhausted we just kept going. To this day, I still don't really understand what the hell that was. I was standing in my headphones about to cross a very busy intersection when I not done much saw a sense a light out of the corner of my left eye. I have no outside sound since I'm in sound blocking headphones listening intently to an audiobook, looking at my phone screen. I also sense something moving in that same corner. I don't process what's going on. Like at all. All I can see is my left arm whipping itself out. I do mean itself. I register no prompt or desire to do this at the moment, without me registering it and violently pushing a girl, much smaller than me physically, probably a teen, backwards into the ground. I perceive all this happening at totally normal speed. She stumbles slowly backwards and falls on her ass, and I very slowly look down and take one step back. As I look back up, there is a car in front of my fucking face, literally less than half an inch from my face, just wheezing past me where I was a second ago and this girl was about to walk into. I look left, she is looking up at me, and what I can see is yelling, "Thank you" in her language, These is in a foreign city, and crying. I finally come to take off my headphones, and it's like time and sound rush back in, including her now loud voice sobbing and tanking me. I literally look at my left arm in shock and just continue crossing the street. It felt like I had an importer arm and leg just doing things without me prompting them to. This happened some time ago, and I can still distinctly remember the slowdown of time and my body just doing things without asking me. That fucking bridge. This sounds fake, it really does, but whether or not you believe it is your choice. So randomly you have a really vivid dream about something really average like a family dinner, but it's like really real and you wake up and it just kind of sticks with you? I had this dream and we were in a car, so we were driving across this bridge. This fucked me up. Not sure why, but this bridge made my heart race and made me sweat a shit ton like WTF. Later that day we go somewhere, and I see that fucking bridge. As we go over it, nothing happens. I'm like, why am I freaking out? It's a dream, so we drive forward and turn left, and it's the same bridge 20 feet away from the original, but it's like deja vu, all the same cars, the same trees, and the same river. My sister is like holy SHT at this point, everyone is so confused and lost right now. Next, instead, we turn right. Deja fucking vu, it's the same fucking bridge, so we're all like the actual fuck. And then we come out. This is a big river with a 200-foot bridge, and the nearest bridge is a mile away. I know what I saw, and I'm sticking to it. I'm very scientifically inclined, but what the fuck? I don't know what it was, and I don't know how to explain it. A friend and I were talking about a similar topic while out walking and shared a few basic coincidences that weren't that big of a deal. Plus, he was easy to razz. So, I was mostly pulling his chain at this point in the conversation and joking the Matrix was real. He immediately shot down the idea, and I said, no seriously, it is. I kid you not. As soon as I said that, we look up, and two white peacocks cross the road and then totally disappear behind a house. We're in the middle of a suburban neighborhood. So we walk quickly up there, and they're nowhere to be seen. No fences to hide them. They're gone. So we laugh it off and finish walking a few houses down. When we walked in the door, this guy who's always a jerk to us was there, but on his way out and was weirdly nice to us. So I shot my friend to see. I told you look, and he rolls his eyes. Then, when he moves to leave, guess who's on the TV? Neo. And not just at any part of the movie. It's the end where he does his badass flying off and the credits roll. I said, I rest my case, and we never talked about it again. I was totally joking about it initially, but after that experience, I was honestly hardcore freaked out. My father-in-law died around 9 p.m. or so at night, at home, while friends and family were downstairs. He had been battling pancreatic cancer for several months, and we all knew it was coming. He had been on in-home hospice care for several days leading up to his actual death. Anyways, the very next morning his cell receives this text from an old friend, who knew about his diagnosis but didn't know how quickly the disease had progressed. Hi Jay. I dreamed about you this AM. I would love to see you, but would settle for listening to you. I really miss your voice, your laugh, and your accent. Can we talk today, please? I'd like to see how you're doing. You were smiling in my dream. You didn't speak. You just looked at me and smiled. It was a sweet dream. The only reason I can quote this is because it freaked my wife and I out so hard that we screenshotted the message. To this day, none of us can explain it. Was it really just coincidental timing? Did she know somehow? Did the universe somehow inform her? It is without a doubt the most inexplicable/coincidental thing I've ever experienced. When I turned 12, which was on December 12, 2002, yeah, no kidding, I left the house a bit earlier to buy some candy to bring to school. Tradition in my country is that kids bring candy to classmates on the day of their birthday. The convenience store was in the other direction from our house than school. As I was returning from the shop and heading to school, I passed by the house again. Now I was walking on the other side of the street, while normally my siblings and I would walk on the side where the house is. I saw my sister, 9 at the time, and brother, 7, exiting the house, so I waved at them to cross the street and join me. Logically, that wouldn't make any sense, they were 2, the house side was closer to school, etc., but for some reason I did that, and because I am the oldest one, they did cross and join me. About 30 seconds later, a car crashed in the neighbor's fence, exactly in the spot where my siblings would have been walking. My takeaway from this story is to try and be a good leader and follow instincts even if they don't make sense at first sight. Sitting in the lounge at my grandparents' house when I was about 8 years old. Granny, Dad, and Granddad were talking about something not important. I randomly interrupt, asking about my uncle, Dad's brother, who we haven't heard from in years. He's a bit of a black sheep. We don't talk about him. Dad says, "Oh, he's dead." Granny says he was hit by a lamppost. Their tone didn't change when they said this. And then they just go back to talking as if they never said anything. Granddad's just sitting there with a WTF look on his face because no one has spoken about Uncle in months. Dad and Granny wouldn't know about this. A few minutes later, the phone rings, and Granddad answers. It's Uncle's partner. Uncle died about 6 a.m. that morning. He was waking down the street when a milk van slipped on black ice, hitting a lamppost, which landed on my uncle, killing him. Everyone used to joke that my grandmother's family is a family of witches. They always knew when weird things would happen but couldn't explain it. There's been a few more experiences like this involving my paternal family. Premonitions and things like that. I had a friend with whom I was crazy close. Despite living 1,000 miles from each other, we always seemed to know the other's physical and emotional state. I got hungry when he forgot to eat, he got drunk when I had a drink, etc. One morning, I was standing in my shower, and all of a sudden, I got this blinding headache. Everything on the left side of my body just feels odd. My hearing is muted, my vision is off kilter, my hand is tingling, and my leg won't fully support my weight. All of this was accompanied by this overwhelming sense of sorrow, so strong that I collapsed to my knees and just wept for the longest time. When I got out, I checked in the mirror, and I could smile, talk, think clearly, walk, etc., so I wrote it off a killer migraine and laid down for a while. That sense of feeling off wore off eventually, and I went back to my usual routine. A few days later, I received a message from my friend's wife, which was really odd because she and I did not get along at all. So much so that I hadn't spoken to my friend in a year because even the mention of my name would send into her a rage and accusations of him cheating on her with me. Never happened. Her message was to inform me that my friend had passed the same morning I collapsed in the shower. He'd had an aneurysm in their kitchen caused, apparently, by an adverse reaction to the chemotherapy he was undergoing for brain cancer. When I was 7, I didn't really know how to swim, and I was in an indoor pool with my cousins, their dad, and my grandparents. I, being a cocky little 7th grader, was showing that I could go around the entire outside. There was a little ledge to hang on, but I thought I was clever. I fell back and couldn't swim. I was running out of breath and panicking. Right when the pain was unbearable, my uncle came and saved me by picking me up and taking me to where I could walk. He then said, "Always hold on." As a little kid, I was thinking, yeah, I'll hold on to the edge of the pool now. Just a few years ago, I lost that uncle that saved me, and in his will, he gave me a chain that I held on to very much. But last year I lost it and have been looking for it for days on end, checking every spot in my house, but I never gave up looking for it because it was very sentimental. Anyway, recently I found it laying on my table in the open, and I was very confused, but I took it as one of my family members leaving it for me, maybe if they found it. I then remember the day I almost drowned and him telling me to always hold on and think of it as good advice since I held on to me trying to find the chain. I ask everyone I remember being at the pool that day if they remember it, which I remember us talking about how I almost drowned a bunch and how they would never forget that, and none of my family remembers that day or even the place we went. I still remember the entire layout of the indoor pool and where everything was, and I'm convinced it was real. If not, then I got so advice to find a chain I didn't even have yet. About 5 years ago, my boss somehow pocket dialed my, at the time, girlfriend with his BlackBerry. They have never met and have completely different numbers, including different area codes, so there is no way I can fathom this happening by chance. I found out when my girlfriend called my cell, asking if I had just called her on a different phone. I said no, and she explained that she overheard a conversation that was related to my rather specific job, so she figured it would have been me. I asked for the number that dialed her, Googled it, and it came up on one of our safety briefing PDFs that was publicly viewable and had his number as an emergency contact. I didn't see him for a few days, but I did ask my boss, and he said he had no clue what I was talking about, though he has called people accidentally before. I didn't push anymore as I felt like I looked a bit crazy. But what are the chances? When I was a kid, we had a dog named Maggie. I can't remember what kind she was. I was probably 7 or 8. One night she was out in the backyard, and my parents told me to go get her, so I walked onto the back porch and yelled for her to come. She looked at me. She was a few yards away. We had a big backyard with a field and some trees behind our house, but about 5 seconds later there was a man's voice that repeated what I just said from the field in the back, yelling, "Maggie, come." Maggie looked to the back of our yard and seemed confused, and I was freaking out thinking someone was trying to dognap her, although I couldn't see if anyone was out there. I yelled to her again, saying, "Maggie, come," and the man's voice repeated me again. And of course Maggie was confused and wouldn't come to the porch, so I ran inside, terrified, telling my parents to hurry and come out because someone's trying to kidnap our dog. Parents came out, no more creepy man voice in the distance. Maggie ran up to us as if nothing happened. Parents said it could have been a neighbor and tried to calm me down. Still no idea what it was, freaked me out. I dated this guy 12 years ago who claimed he was a medium. I am still unsure if I believe in that sort of thing. Anyways, he was walking me through some meditation one night. After about 10 minutes of deep thought, I find myself in a doctor's office. There was a doctor there, and she was speaking. I couldn't hear her, but I felt this overwhelming sense of sadness and could see myself crying in this thought. I snapped myself out of it, and I told him I saw something. And it wasn't good. I just couldn't pinpoint why. I told him, it wasn't about me. We broke up after another 6 months or so. Years have passed. Like 8 years later. My father is sick in the hospital. The nurse wanted to talk to me, and she took me to this private room. That is when she told me my father was terminal and he had about 2 weeks left to live. It didn't click right away, but after he died. I remember thinking back to that day I meditated with my ex. It was the same room and the same nurse I saw. Very weird feeling. I actually reached out and messaged him, told him I finally figured out what it was that I saw, and he gave me his condolences. Just weird. This was something that happened a long time ago, and I still don't understand how it's possible. When I was maybe 8 or 9. I was in the bathroom, sitting on the toilet, doing my business. We had an open shower area beside the toilet. So I was sitting down, the shower head was attached to the wall and turned facing me, not too far from my head. I was staring at it and then had a funny thought. You know, it'll be funny if the water turned on now and the shower head just drenched me in water. I knew that's not going to happen unless I go over and turn the faucet. But I continued to stare at the shower head above me anyway. I'd how long I was staring at it, but suddenly out of nowhere the water turned on for like maybe a split second and splashed me. And it was gone the moment I registered my shock, and I know it happened because I got wet. My hand was nowhere near the faucet, I was just staring at the shower head. It was almost like I wanted the water to turn on. I occasionally wondered if I was just hallucinating or if it even happened because I can't explain it away. In 8th grade, my math teacher got a phone call during class. I distinctly remember him picking up the phone, looking distraught, hanging up, saying that his mother had just died, and then dismissing class early and running out of the room. Naturally, when my parents asked me that night how my day was, I mentioned this story. A week or two later, I'm not totally sure how much time had passed, I'm in the same math class. My teacher gets a call. He picks up, same exact facial expression. He hangs up, tells us his mother had just died, and dismisses the class and runs out of the room. Everyone in the class had the same exact reaction as the first time. I turned to the girl next to me and said, "Didn't she already die?" The girl had no clue what I was talking about. Here's the kicker, I went home that day, and my parents distinctly remember me telling them a week or two earlier that my math teacher's mom had died. Yes, I am 100% sure it was his mother each time, and not a different family member or something like that. I've had other cases of deja vu before and since, but nothing to that extent. It's going to get buried in the thread, but my most horrifying glitch happened in 2014. It might not seem too horrifying to those reading this, but to me it was very horrible. Our electric was out, and I decided to go to bed. It was pretty late midwinter, and I was going to the bedroom, and usually I left the door open to my bedroom. Well, everyone had been in the living room all night. Number 1, my bedroom door was closed completely. Number 2, I went to open the door, and there was something behind the door blocking my entry. I was taken aback, and for some reason I tried touching whatever it was. I don't know what possessed me to do that. It felt like a mattress blocking my doorway. I screeched and ran back into the living room. First of all, nobody had been in the room. Second, there's no way to get back out of my room if you block the door with my mattress. It's the only way in or out of my room. You'd have to remain in the room, and all of the inhabitants of the house were present and accounted for in my living room. Except for the cats, but the cats would not be able to put my mattress against my door. I don't know why, but an hour later I tried again. Even though I was thoroughly crapping my pants, everything was normal again, and I went to bed. Now I wasn't so tired that I hallucinated that. I really was just mildly tired. I hadn't been stressed out. I don't drink and party. I had a normal night's sleep the night before. There's no reason why I would ever hallucinate something like that. My boyfriend wouldn't even go check it out after he saw my face. He just said, "There's nothing blocking the bedroom door." But when I told him to prove it, he didn't go. I think he was afraid that he'd find it blocked. He wasn't having none of that. I think he was afraid because I had a terrified look on my face. I think he slept in the living room that night. Ha ha ha, coward. I don't know if I would even call this a glitch because I'm sure it can be explained by my brain just making this up, but I don't believe that that's what it was. My childhood best friend died tragically and unexpectedly in the summer of 2018. When I say childhood best friend, this guy was more like my twin. We were 9 days apart and close literally since the day he was born. We grew up together, learned to walk together, were each other's first kiss at 4 years old, etc. We were close until the day he died, and he was very literally like my twin brother. We are both only children. I believe in God and heaven and in the concept of an afterlife, reincarnation, etc., and I've seen lots of signs from him since he passed, like me saying "Give me a sign you're here" and a plane flew over my head. He was a pilot and that's how he died, and then me following it up by saying that was just a coincidence and another plane flew over immediately. Another time, at Disneyland, we were in line for Thunder Mountain, and a little bird was following us, hopping around the rafters. I made a comment like "It must be, friend," at which point the bird landed on my head. I have witnesses for that one. But the biggest thing was a dream I had. It was maybe 2 months after he died, and in the dream he and I and a bunch of other random people were at a party at my aunt's old house in Phoenix. Me and the friend have never lived in Phoenix, so I'd quite that's where we were in the dream. But in the dream, I knew he was dead, and I was crying and hugging him and saying, "How are you here? How are you here?" And he just hugged me and said, "It doesn't matter how I'm here, I can't tell you about it, but I'm here," and he was happy, healthy, and okay. It's making me cry just typing it. Like I said, not exactly a glitch, but everything that I've experienced when loved ones have died, especially everything with him, solidifies in my mind beyond a shadow of a doubt that this life isn't it. My 5-year-old freaks me out a lot. On multiple occasions, he said what I'm thinking. The one I can think of right now was last January. He'd been sick off and on for a few weeks. It ended up being mono, but we didn't know what was going on at the time. I was driving both kids to my in-laws, and it was winter, so the heat was on full blast and the radio was on. I know for a fact that I wasn't talking out loud. Anyway, I thought to myself, I wonder if he'll let me check his throat when we get there, because he'd been grumpy since he didn't feel well and hadn't let me check. As soon as I thought it, he said, "Yeah, Mom, you can check my throat." I asked why he said that, and he said because I'd asked. I thought I was going crazy and that I'd said it out loud, so I said, "Did I just ask you that out loud? The way I'm asking you now? Did I make the words with my mouth?" And he laughed, rolled his eyes like it was hilarious, and said, "No. I heard you ask me in my head." Once when I was pretty young, kindergarten under grade 4, a clementine, or mandarin, one of those tiny oranges fell off the desk across from mine. Several of my classmates, including me, scrambled to grab it before it hit the ground, and I remember a sensation of time stopping. Like the world went still for a split second. I could see the clementine/mandarin hovering above the ground, with my classmates' hands reaching out towards it, but everything was frozen, like a paused video. Another time I had a dream where I woke up and went to my parents' bedroom. The room was dark, but I could still see perfectly, like a photo of a dark room, but someone edited it to be brighter. Anyway, there were 2 sets of my parents, one set sleeping on the bed, another set on the floor. Dream me clearly thought, well, this is a trap, the ones in bed aren't real, so I wake up the set on the floor. They open their eyes, and the eyes are red. I wake up, rush to my parents' room, and lo and behold, there's a strange lump on the floor. It turns out it was just a pile of clothing. The creepiest part is that a few years ago, after the incident, I was scrolling through a ghost story site, and I saw the exact same story posted there. Dream about two sets of parents, waking the ones on the floor, waking up Earl, and rushing to the parents' bedroom to find a strange lump on the floor that turns out to be laundry. It threw me out of the loop for a while and made me think. Maybe younger me somehow posted the story on the site then forgot. Maybe I read it before and my brain created a false memory, who knows? It still creeps me out to this day. The third story happened fairly recently, as in 2 to 4 years ago recently. I was chilling in my room, home alone, and I got up when suddenly I started hearing vivid noises. It sounded like the TV was playing downstairs. It only happened when I stood in a certain area. The world around me felt off too, like it was fuzzy. This has happened another time since, except I heard carnival music. For time frame clarification, the first story would have happened before 2014. The second story would have happened anywhere between 2014 and 2015, and the third would have been 2016 to 2018. Two things happened to me recently, both involving my parents. The first incident. I was sitting on my couch watching SmackDown, when it was still on Tuesdays, and during one particular match that I found boring, I was on my phone. I heard my mom call me from the kitchen, and I asked her what she wanted. No response. I ignored her and continued on my phone when I heard her call my name again from the kitchen. I rolled my eyes and got up to go to the kitchen when I took a glance at the wrestling match, which brought me back to reality. I moved out to my own place in the suburbs months prior. It was a work day, my mom lived in the city, an hour plus away, and she didn't drive. I freaked out and closed the door to my family room. The old house has a door in the family room. The door has windows at the top, and I took a step stool and peeked through the windows for like half an hour. The weird thing was that my dogs didn't react at all, almost like they didn't hear it. Just kept lying down on the couch. I have smart lights, so I turned on all the lights in the living room and the kitchen so I could see if someone was back there. I checked the camera from the back porch, connected to the kitchen, and saw nothing. After half an hour, I checked the whole house and realized I was indeed alone with my dogs. Was extremely weird. I told my mom the following weekend, and she found me crazy for staying there alone. Second incident. I was sleeping on my first weekend off in months. I usually wake up at 8 a.m. on my days off, but I was exhausted and slept a little longer. Reiterating one more time, I live alone with my 2 dogs. So when I heard my dad say my name in the frantic voice he'd use whenever he wanted me to quickly wake up, I freaked out. I nearly took myself out when I jumped out of bed and my foot got caught in the sheets and I fell. My dad had passed away a year before I got my own place. Needless to say, I see why my parents never wanted to buy a house in the suburbs and live their whole lives in the city. Shit just starts getting weird when a house in a small town is involved. When I was 13, I was completely home alone. I was lying on my bed watching some YouTube videos, and suddenly I heard cooking in the kitchen. I thought my mom already came home, so I was pretty calm, but then she called me on my phone. I got chills. With my eyes wide open, I answered. She just asked if I was fine and all that. I said that I was fine, but I was dying inside. Few minutes pass. And then again, I hear some kind of action going on in the kitchen. I thought it was my cat, so I went out to see what was going on. My cat was asleep, and the kitchen was untouched. I call my mom again out of paranoia. Shaking, I told her what was going on. She said it might be ambience noises. It was summer, so our windows were most of the time open. I thought, hey, maybe neighbors are cooking. I went to check, and windows were completely shut. I ran to my room, I shut my door and locked it. Then I closed my closet and put my head under the pillow. I can hear the noise again. It was clear that it was in the kitchen, our kitchen, cooking. I tried not to think about it and tried to go on with the day, but the noise just got louder and louder. I was paranoid so much I couldn't move at this point. I stayed there still for 30 minutes, and then my mom came. I told her everything, and she said I was hallucinating. This still freaks me out to this day. I had chills writing this. Oh, that's easy, Tardis gas station. This requires an explanation. My coworkers and I had a habit of going to this buffet about twice a month. It was a Chinese place and freaking huge, like they bought a sporting goods store and decided at the last minute they really liked egg rolls instead. It could have sat 400 customers easily, but instead of booths, they built out a massive amount of buffet aisles. Think Vegas casino buffet, but it's all Chinese dishes from every part of the country. So yeah, we indulged. So I'm the carpool guy, always have been. Me, 3 of my brothers in cubicle packed into a tiny Mazda. It was about a mile down the street, through a huge 4-way stop, turning right into a parking lot bigger than some Amazon rainforests. You had to be careful about lane changes because the road lines were painted weird. I'm mentioning these details for a reason. I knew that route like the back of my hand. So I'd pass the light, pull in, and drive 3 football fields' worth of empty lots to park. When we were done, I'd reverse the process. Now, the parking lot was so freaking big that there were actually 2 traffic lights at opposite corners. So when I start moving, I'd look to see which light just turned red and just go cross lot to the other one. It's 4 acres of wide open concrete, hitting people was not going to be an issue. I'd been doing that same traffic light trick for almost 2 years. 2 years. Okay, Tardis time. Finished with our Asian glutton session, we all pile into my Mazda. I start up, glance at the corner light, and it just turns red. No trouble, I crank it right and go cross lot to the other one. And directly through a goddamn 8-island gas station. At 30 miles per hour and accelerating. Everyone starts screaming. People pumping gas dive onto their cars to get out of my way. I hit a right-hand turn and smashed the brakes so hard the anti-lock made that rook 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 sound as the tires ground out. That I didn't annihilate an entire family is a goddamn miracle. And then before I can say shit, my friend Travis yells, "Where the fuck did this gas station come from?" That was like 8 years ago, and to this day all 4 of us swear to God that parking lot had been entirely, 100% empty until suddenly. It wasn't. But everyone else we talked to swears up and down it had been there forever. I even went inside and checked the stupid business license posted on the wall. It was 4 years old, renewed every year. But we cut across that empty lot at least twice a month, sometimes 3 or more. Tardis gas station. A loved one, we'll call them X, had been revived after being dead / without oxygen for nearly 15 minutes. The coma following lasted a few weeks. We were told there was no telling how this would play out, so I spent every day with them. I went a long time with barely any sleep, and one night I can just recall falling into bed and just lying awake. I had cried for days, and it felt like I just couldn't anymore. So I fell into a deep sleep and ended up in a place that felt familiar, although it was dark, and I can't at all possibly identify if it were a room or a specific location. I just recall chairs, and around me no walls but a void, black and thick but not alarming. X was there, and we just talked as if nothing had changed, an aimless conversation we would have had on any occasion. When the conversation had come to a lull, we just sat for a moment before I asked X, "You know, you gotta come back, right?" X took a deep breath, as if they were working out a conflict in their mind. They took a moment, looked me in the eye, and said, "Yeah, I think so too." I woke up really early, went to work, and then stopped by the hospital just like every day preceding. Never mentioned it to my family or friends. I felt as though they would only think it was a feel-good story or a corny fabrication. In another week and a half, X was back and functioning exceptionally well given the circumstances. The hospital/rehab staff were in disbelief. X is living a normal life. And though I don't want to sound like an ass, I couldn't help but feel like I knew it all along. I am not religious.